I'm Sarah Adams, 42 years old, and nothing prepared me for the moment my parents and sister told my 16-year-old daughter Madison that there was no room for her at Christmas. The family who once knitted her baby blankets and celebrated every milestone suddenly decided she wasn't welcome. The shock still hits me when I remember the look in my daughter's eyes that day. Before I continue with this painful story, let me know where you're watching from and hit that like button. This Christmas experience completely transformed what family means to me. Life wasn't always this complicated. When Madison was 9, her father and I divorced after 12 years of marriage. He moved across the country for a job opportunity, promising to stay involved, but gradually becoming a twice-a-year parent at best. The divorce blindsided me, but I was determined to give Maddie stability despite our world turning upside down. During those early years, my parents Robert and Nancy Thompson were our rock. Dad, a retired high school principal with his trademark cardigan sweaters and endless patience, would drive 40 minutes every Saturday to take Maddie fishing or help with her science projects. Mom, with her warm hugs and kitchen filled with the smell of cinnamon rolls, became Maddie's confidant. They converted their home office into Maddie's room, decorated with glow-in-the-dark stars because she loved astronomy. My sister Jessica appeared supportive too. 3 years younger than me with the perfect-seeming life, successful real estate agent husband Brian, 2 well-behaved children Tyler and Emma, who were 12 and 10. They lived in a sprawling colonial house just 15 minutes from our parents. Jessica always had color-coordinated holiday decorations and hosted picture-perfect gatherings that made my modest apartment feel inadequate. Christmas at my parents' home had been our sacred tradition. Mom would put up the tree the day after Thanksgiving, and each ornament told a family story. Maddie's handmade decorations from elementary school hung prominently. Dad played Santa with convincing enthusiasm, even long after the kids knew the truth. We'd wake up to the smell of Mom's special cranberry orange bread and spend the day in pajamas, opening gifts and playing board games. These holidays sustained us through the hardest times. But things began shifting subtly after Maddie turned 15. The first hints were so small I dismissed them. Mom questioning Maddie's black nail polish. Dad commenting that her music was just noise. Jessica pulling me aside to mention that Maddie seemed moody around her children. Small criticisms that seemed typical for dealing with a teenager. Maddie had indeed changed, as all teenagers do. Her childhood love of pastels and ponies transformed into an interest in photography, particularly black and white urban landscapes. She dyed her naturally blonde hair with subtle purple highlights. She became quieter, more introspective, though her grades remained excellent. She joined the school newspaper and spent hours editing photos in her room. I saw these changes as healthy exploration, finding her identity. Working as a hospital administrator meant long, unpredictable hours. I'd often come home exhausted to find Maddie had made dinner or done the laundry without being asked. She never complained about my schedule, even when I missed her photography exhibition because of an emergency at work. That guilt still gnaws at me. I took extra shifts that fall to save money for Christmas gifts, wanting to make the holiday special. Maddie had her heart set on a professional camera lens that cost nearly $1,000, and I was determined to make it happen. When Mom called in September to confirm our Christmas plans, everything seemed normal. "We're counting down the days," she said. "Your father's already planning which Christmas movies to watch with Maddie." I mentioned Maddie's photography passion, suggesting they might consider a gift related to that. Mom's response was oddly tepid. "Well, we'll see what makes sense for everyone." Looking back, I should have noticed how Mom stopped asking about Maddie's activities, how our Sunday family dinners became less frequent, with Jessica often creating last-minute excuses. When we did gather, I caught Jessica watching Maddie with narrowed eyes whenever she spoke to Tyler or Emma. Tyler, once Maddie's devoted shadow, now barely acknowledged her. Maddie began declining invitations to family events. "I have a lot of homework," she'd say, or, "I promised to help Zoe with a..." Project. I encouraged her to maintain family connections but didn't push when she seemed genuinely uncomfortable. I assumed it was normal teenage desire for independence, not recognizing it as self-protection. By November, Maddie was spending more time in her room, her smiles less frequent. One evening, I found her crying over her laptop, but she quickly wiped her tears and claimed it was just a sad movie. I suggested she talk to her school counselor if something was bothering her, but she insisted everything was fine. I should have pressed harder, looked closer, asked better questions. I was working 60-hour weeks, exhaustion clouding my judgment. Each paycheck brought me closer to affording that camera lens, convinced material generosity could compensate for my absences. I planned our Christmas stay at my parents' meticulously, wrapping presents during lunch breaks, ordering Maddie's favorite peppermint hot chocolate to bring along, even finding the matching Christmas pajamas Mom bought us every year. The warning signs were there, flashing brightly, but I was too focused on maintaining traditions to see the danger ahead. The first undeniable red flag appeared exactly 1 week before Christmas. I was at work finishing patient discharge paperwork when Mom called. Her voice carried that artificial brightness that always signaled bad news. "Sarah, honey, I wanted to talk about Christmas arrangements," she began. My stomach tightened instantly. "What about them? We're still coming Christmas Eve and staying through the 26th like always, right?" A pause. "Well, yes, but I was thinking, Maddie's getting older now. Doesn't she have friends she might want to spend time with instead? You know, other teenagers?" I stepped away from my desk into the hallway. "Mom, what are you talking about? Maddie loves Christmas with the family. She's been talking about Dad's famous hot cocoa for weeks. It's just that, well, Jessica mentioned her children might need some special attention this year. Tyler's having anxiety about his school performance, and Emma's at such an impressionable age. And that affects Maddie's invitation, how exactly?" My voice sharpened. Mom sighed. "Things are complicated, Sarah. The house feels smaller each year. We're not suggesting Maddie can't come at all, just maybe for Christmas dinner only, not the overnight stay." I felt like I'd been slapped. "We've always stayed over. Maddie's room is still there, right? The one with the stars on the ceiling?" Another pause. "We've been using it for storage recently. Space is just tight with Jessica's family coming." "Mom, Jessica's house is 15 minutes away. They've never needed to stay overnight before. Brian's mother is using their guest room this year, so they need to stay with us," she replied quickly. "Look, we just thought Maddie being a teenager now might appreciate some independence. You could come for the full time, of course." My hand tightened around the phone. "You're inviting me but not my daughter? That's not happening, Mom. We're a package deal. Always have been. Don't overreact, Sarah. Nobody's uninviting anyone. We're just making adjustments for everyone's comfort." After hanging up, I sat in the stairwell trying to process this bizarre conversation. That evening, I casually asked Maddie if Grandma had been in touch recently. Her hesitation was immediate. "Just some weird texts," she finally admitted. "What kind of weird texts?" Maddie retrieved her phone and showed me a conversation that made my blood run cold. 3 days earlier, Nancy had texted, "Christmas might be different this year. Do you really need to come for the whole time? Your cousins are going through sensitive phases." Maddie had responded politely, "I was looking forward to our traditional Christmas. Did I do something wrong?" Nancy's reply, "Nothing specific, dear. Just wondering if you might be happier with friends your own age. The house will be very crowded." I called Mom immediately, no longer containing my anger. "I just saw your text to Maddie. What's going on?" Mom stammered about limited space and adult conversations and how teenagers need different environments. Each excuse sounded hollow. "We've been coming to Christmas for 7 years since the divorce," I reminded her. "The house hasn't shrunk. Nothing has changed except your attitude toward my daughter." "Sarah, you're being dramatic. We just thought—" "Both of us are coming as planned," I interrupted firmly. If that's a problem, tell me now so we can make alternative arrangements. After a long silence, Mom reluctantly agreed, but without her usual enthusiasm about seeing us. After hanging up, I found Maddie standing in the hallway. "We don't have to go, Mom," she said quietly. "We could do our own thing this year." I hugged her tightly. "Nonsense. It's tradition. Everything will be fine once we're there." Maddie nodded but didn't look convinced. That should have been my second warning. The next few days were a flurry of last-minute preparations. I wrapped Maddie's camera lens with shaking hands, still disturbed by the conversation with Mom. I bought extra gifts for Tyler and Emma, hoping to smooth whatever mysterious tension existed. I even purchased an expensive bottle of Brian's favorite scotch as a peace offering, though the thought of spending extra money on my brother-in-law after he'd apparently agreed to this "no room for Maddie" nonsense made me queasy. Maddie grew quieter as Christmas approached. I caught her staring at old family photos, particularly one from 2 Christmases ago, where she sat between her grandparents wearing matching Santa hats. When I asked what she was thinking, she simply said, "Things change, I guess." The night before our departure, I overheard Maddie on the phone with her friend Zoe. "I don't think they want me there," she said, her voice breaking slightly. "I don't know what I did wrong. I should have canceled right then, should have created our own Christmas magic at home, should have protected my child from what was coming. Instead, I convinced myself that face-to-face interaction would clear up this strange misunderstanding. That my parents couldn't possibly reject their only granddaughter once they saw her in person. I was catastrophically wrong. On Christmas Eve morning, I loaded our suitcases into the car while Maddie sat silently in the passenger seat. The normally festive 2-hour drive to my parents' home in Connecticut felt heavy with unspoken worries. Maddie kept her earbuds in, staring out the window at the snow-covered landscape. Occasionally, I'd catch her wiping her eyes when she thought I wasn't looking. "Everything will be fine," I said for perhaps the 20th time, trying to convince myself as much as her. "Grandma's probably just stressed about hosting. You know how she gets before big gatherings." Maddie nodded without removing her earbuds. I noticed she was wearing the conservative blue sweater her grandparents had given her last Christmas instead of her usual band t-shirts. She'd removed her purple hair highlights 2 days earlier without explanation. These small sacrifices of her identity made my heart ache. As we turned onto my parents' street, the first discrepancy jumped out immediately. Every year, Dad strung multicolored lights along the driveway and placed the illuminated reindeer family on the front lawn, with a special smaller reindeer he'd always said represented Maddie. Today, the house had only a simple wreath on the door. No lights, no reindeer family. "They must have scaled back the decorations this year," I said, trying to sound casual while anxiety twisted my stomach. Maddie didn't respond, just gathered her backpack as I parked behind Jessica's SUV. We stood at the front door for nearly a minute after knocking before Jessica answered, her picture-perfect smile not reaching her eyes. "Oh, you're early," she said, though we'd arrived at exactly the time we'd been arriving for years. "Traffic was lighter than expected," I replied, leaning in for a hug she barely returned. "Where are Mom and Dad?" "Dad's watching the game with Brian. Mom's finishing the appetizers." Jessica's eyes flickered over Maddie. "Hello, Madison." Not Maddie, as she'd always been called by family. Not even a hug for her niece. Just a cool Madison, like she was addressing a stranger. "Hi, Aunt Jessica," Maddie responded quietly. "Merry Christmas." Jessica stepped aside to let us enter without returning the greeting. The house smelled wonderfully of pine and cinnamon as always, but something felt off. I scanned the living room and immediately noticed what was missing. Mom's special Christmas Village collection was displayed as usual on the mantel, but the tiny figure wearing a purple coat that had always represented Maddie was missing from the family scene. Dad looked up briefly from the television. "You made It, he said flatly, then returned his attention to the football game. No hug, no warm welcome. Brian nodded in our direction without speaking. Mom emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on her Christmas apron. Sarah, dear, you're here. She hugged me briefly, then gave Maddie an awkward pat on the shoulder. Madison, you've grown taller. Maddie attempted a smile. Thanks for having us, Grandma. An uncomfortable silence followed before Mom said, Well, I'd better check on the cheese puffs. She disappeared back into the kitchen. I followed her, leaving Maddie momentarily in the living room. Mom, what's going on? That was the coldest welcome I've ever experienced. Nothing's going on, she insisted, arranging crackers on a serving plate with intense focus. We're just busy getting everything ready. Where are Tyler and Emma? They usually tackle Maddie the moment we arrive. Upstairs. They're finishing wrapping presents. I noticed the line of stockings hung along the staircase, one for each family member, hand-knitted by Mom years ago. Mine was there. So were stockings for Mom, Dad, Jessica, Brian, Tyler, and Emma. Maddie's was conspicuously absent. Where's Maddie's stocking? I asked, my voice tight. Mom glanced up briefly. I couldn't find it. Must have been misplaced during cleaning. The stocking she'd personally knitted and had displayed every Christmas for 16 years was suddenly misplaced? I didn't believe it for a second. We'll be putting our bags in the usual room, I said, turning to leave. About that, Mom stopped. Me. The guest room's under renovation. We set up the pull-out sofa in the den for you both. The renovation excuse made no sense. We'd spoken just days earlier with no mention of home improvements. The den was a small, drafty room that Dad used for storage. The pull-out sofa was ancient and notoriously uncomfortable. When I returned to the living room, Maddie stood alone, looking at family photos on the wall. Jessica and the men had disappeared. Let's get settled in the den, I told her. Apparently they're renovating the guest room. Maddie nodded, unsurprised by this latest evidence of our diminished status. The den was exactly as I'd feared, cold and unwelcoming. The pull-out sofa barely fit among boxes of Dad's old teaching materials. No Christmas decorations brightened this room. The message was clear. We were an afterthought, relegated to the least comfortable space in the house. As we unpacked, I heard Tyler and Emma's voices in the hallway. They paused outside our door, whispering, then continued past without greeting their cousin. Maddie pretended not to notice, carefully arranging her few belongings in a corner of the room. Should we go help Grandma with dinner? She suggested, clearly trying to normalize the situation. In the kitchen, Mom was directing Jessica in meal preparation. Their conversation stopped abruptly when we entered. Need any help? I asked brightly. No, we have a system, Jessica replied. Too many cooks and all that. Every previous Christmas, cooking together had been a central tradition. Now we were superfluous. During the awkward family dinner that evening, conversation flowed around Maddie like water around a stone. Jessica dominated with stories about Tyler's academic achievements and Emma's dance recitals. When Maddie politely mentioned her photography being selected for the school showcase, Jessica immediately redirected the conversation to Tyler's science project. The gift exchange that followed dinner only heightened the discomfort. While Tyler and Emma received multiple large presents from my parents, Maddie unwrapped a single gift card to a bookstore. No personal touch, no recognition of her interests or personality. The contrast was striking and obviously intentional. Thank you, Maddie said softly, forcing a smile. I watched her fighting back tears and felt my own anger rising. Later, as we prepared for bed on the lumpy pull-out sofa, I heard Jessica and Mom talking in the hallway. Tomorrow will be difficult, Jessica whispered. Brian thinks we should just be direct about the situation. Let's not ruin Christmas Eve, Mom replied. We'll address it in the morning. I lay awake long after Maddie fell into troubled sleep, wondering what situation required addressing and why my family was treating my daughter like an unwelcome stranger. The holiday magic I'd promised Maddie had transformed into something cold and exclusive, and I had no idea why. Christmas morning dawned gray and somber, matching the atmosphere inside the house. In previous years, we would have been awakened by the excited voices of Tyler and Emma, eager to open presents. This year, silence stretched until nearly 9:00 when muffled sounds of Christmas music and conversation finally filtered into our makeshift bedroom. Maddie had been awake for hours, scrolling through her phone, her expression increasingly troubled. When I suggested we join the family, she hesitated. "Mom, can we leave early? Maybe after lunch?" she asked quietly. "I don't think anyone wants me here." "Nonsense," I insisted, though my conviction was wavering. "It's Christmas. We're family. Whatever tension exists, we'll clear it up." Maddie shook her head. "You don't understand. This isn't new. It's just more obvious now." Before I could question her further, Tyler and Emma's excited voices announced the start of present opening. We made our way to the living room where the rest of the family had already gathered around the Christmas tree. No one had bothered to, tell us this family tradition was beginning. "There you are," Mom said with artificial brightness. "We thought you might want to sleep in." The present opening proceeded with painful awkwardness. The disparity in gifts was impossible to ignore. Tyler and Emma unwrapped mountain bikes, expensive electronics, and designer clothes. Jessica and Brian exchanged lavish jewelry and golf clubs. My parents received thoughtful, personalized gifts from Jessica's family. When it came to Maddie's gifts for her cousins, photography prints she'd carefully matted and framed herself, Tyler barely glanced at his before setting it aside while Emma whispered something to Jessica before offering a quick, "Thanks." The beautiful hand-knitted scarf Maddie had selected for my mother was acknowledged with a distracted, "How nice," before being placed underneath other presents. My gifts to the family were received with similar polite detachment. The expensive scotch for Brian elicited a mere nod. The antique brooch for Mom, purchased with 3 extra hospital shifts, was given cursory appreciation. The most telling moment came when I handed Maddie the carefully wrapped camera lens she'd been wanting for months. Her genuine surprise and joy illuminated her face briefly before she noticed everyone watching. She quickly subdued her reaction, thanking me quietly while Jessica made a pointed comment about excessive spending. After presents, Maddie offered to help clean up the discarded wrapping paper, but Jessica quickly said, "Emma and Tyler will handle it. Why don't you go read or something?" The dismissal was unmistakable. Maddie retreated to the den while I helped Mom prepare Christmas brunch, determined to understand what was happening. "Mom, we need to talk about how Maddie's being treated," I said when we were momentarily alone in the kitchen. "She feels unwelcome, and frankly, so do I." Mom busied herself with the coffee maker. "I don't know what you mean." "The missing stocking? The cold reception? The way everyone ignores her or cuts her off? What's going on?" "You're being oversensitive," Mom replied. "Teenagers often feel awkward at family gatherings." "This isn't normal teenage awkwardness. This is deliberate exclusion," I insisted. "Did Maddie do something I don't know about?" Mom's expression hardened slightly. "Perhaps you should ask Jessica. She has concerns about Madison's influence." Before I could respond, Jessica entered the kitchen with Emma. They fell silent upon seeing me, exchanging meaningful glances. "What concerns Jessica?" I asked directly. "What exactly is your problem with Maddie?" Jessica straightened, as though she'd been waiting for this confrontation. "This isn't the time, Sarah." "It's exactly the time. My daughter is being treated like she has some contagious disease, and I want to know why." Jessica glanced at Emma. "Emma, go find your father." Once her daughter left, Jessica's pleasant facade dropped completely. Tyler found inappropriate content on Madison's Instagram. Profanity, discussions about depression, dark photography. Not the kind of influence I want around my children. I was momentarily speechless. Are you serious? You're excluding a 16-year-old from Christmas because her social media isn't perfectly sunny? Teenagers express themselves online, Jessica. It doesn't make them bad people. It's not just social media, Jessica continued. Tyler mentioned Madison talked about feeling depressed and questioning religious beliefs. She suggested our church's stance on certain issues was outdated. These aren't values we want our children exposed to. The pieces suddenly clicked into place. Maddie had been struggling with questions about identity and purpose, normal, teenage development, and had apparently confided in her cousins. Instead of offering support, they had reported her concerning behavior to their parents, who had decided she was a negative influence. So rather than helping your niece through normal teenage challenges, you've decided to reject her completely? My voice rose despite my efforts to remain calm. Mom jumped in. No one's rejecting her, Sarah. We're just concerned about boundaries and appropriate influences. Appropriate influences? She's a straight A student who volunteers at the animal shelter and has never been in trouble. What exactly is inappropriate about her? Jessica's expression hardened. Our family has certain values and expectations. Madison's behavior and attitudes don't align with those anymore. The kitchen door swung open as Dad and Brian entered, clearly drawn by our raised voices. Maddie hovered uncertainly in the hallway beyond, her face pale. What's happening? Dad asked, though his expression suggested he knew exactly what was being discussed. Apparently, my daughter is being ostracized because she dared to express normal teenage emotions and questions, I said bitterly. Care to weigh in, Dad? Is Maddie suddenly not good enough for this family? Dad looked uncomfortable, but stood beside my mother. Sarah, we're just concerned about the dynamic between the cousins. Tyler's at a vulnerable age, and Emma is very impressionable. And Maddie isn't vulnerable? She lost her father to divorce, works twice as hard as most kids, her age, and has supported this family in countless ways. Now you're treating her like she's done something terrible by simply growing up and developing her own perspectives. Brian cleared his throat. Look, Sarah, no one's saying Madison isn't welcome in the family. We're just suggesting that perhaps some space would be beneficial for everyone right now. Space? At Christmas? When exactly did my family become so conditional in their love? Mom's voice turned cold. I think you're overreacting, Sarah. We're simply trying to protect our family values. And Maddie isn't family? I challenged. Jessica stepped forward. Of course she is, but right now her behavior is concerning. The black clothing, the moody photographs, the questioning attitude. These aren't positive influences for Tyler and Emma. So what exactly are you saying? I demanded. There was a moment of heavy silence before Mom finally spoke the words that would permanently alter our family. There's simply no room for this kind of behavior in our family, not at Christmas. What does that even mean? I asked, though I already knew. Jessica looked directly at me. It means we think it would be better if Madison didn't stay for Christmas dinner. You're welcome to stay, Sarah, but there's no room for her at Christmas this year. The silence that followed was deafening. I turned to see Maddie standing in the doorway, having heard every word. The devastation on her face was unbearable. Years of subtle rejection culminating in this explicit exclusion. Mom, Maddie whispered, her voice breaking. Can we please go home now? I moved immediately to her side, putting my arm around her shoulders. Yes, baby, we're leaving right now. Sarah, don't be dramatic, Mom started. We can discuss this rationally. There's nothing rational about rejecting a child at Christmas, I interrupted. And there's certainly nothing Christian about it either, since you're so concerned about family values. Jessica rolled her eyes. This is exactly the kind of overreaction. Stop talking, I snapped with such force that Jessica actually stepped back. You don't get to reject my daughter and then criticize my reaction to it. I guided Maddie toward the den to gather our things. Tyler and Emma watched silently from the staircase, their expressions a mix of confusion and discomfort. Clearly, they hadn't expected their complaints about their cousin to result in this dramatic outcome. As we hastily packed our bags, Dad appeared in the doorway. "Sarah, let's not end Christmas this way. You're still welcome to stay." "Without my daughter?" "That's not a real invitation, Dad. That's asking me to choose between you and my child. There is no choice there." His expression softened slightly. "Madison could perhaps join us for dessert later, after the main dinner?" The suggestion was so insulting I nearly laughed. "You want to banish her for the main celebration but let her have scraps afterward?" "No, Dad. We're a package deal. Always have been, always will be." Dad sighed. "Jessica has valid concerns about Madison's influence." "No, she doesn't," I interrupted. "She has judgmental, narrow-minded opinions about a teenager who's finding her own way in the world. And apparently, so do you and Mom." We finished packing in silence. As we carried our bags to the front door, the entire family had gathered. In the living room, watching us leave, Mom made one last attempt. "Sarah, you're ruining Christmas over a simple misunderstanding." I paused at the door. "No, Mom. You ruined Christmas when you decided your granddaughter wasn't worthy of unconditional love. When you chose Jessica's controlling parenting style over your relationship with Maddie. When you decided family values were more important than actual family." With those words, I closed the door behind us, helping Maddie into the car as she finally released the tears she'd been holding back. The drive away from my childhood home on Christmas Day became the dividing line between who we had been and who we would become. A painful but necessary separation that would eventually lead us toward healing. The 2-hour drive home passed in tearful silence. Occasionally, I'd reach over to squeeze Maddie's hand, but words seemed inadequate against the magnitude of the rejection we'd just experienced. The highway was nearly empty on Christmas Day. Most families gathered around dinner tables and Christmas trees, exactly where we should have been. When we finally pulled into our apartment complex, the sight of our dark windows emphasized how unprepared we were for this turn of events. No Christmas lights welcomed us home. No tree waited inside. We'd expected to return the day after Christmas to our normal routine, not to seek refuge on the holiday itself. Inside, Maddie immediately headed to her bedroom without speaking. I stood in our living room, surrounded by the everyday objects that suddenly seemed insufficient against the holiday emptiness. The sound of muffled sobbing from Maddie's room finally broke my paralysis. I knocked gently on her door. "Can I come in, sweetheart?" When she didn't answer, I entered anyway, finding her curled on her bed, clutching the old teddy bear her grandfather had given her on her 5th birthday. The sight broke my heart all over again. "I'm so sorry," I said, sitting beside her. "What they did was inexcusable. None of it was your fault." Maddie sat up, wiping her eyes. "But maybe it was, Mom. Maybe I am a bad influence." "Absolutely not. You're thoughtful, kind, and finding your own path. There's nothing wrong with that." She took a shuddering breath. "There's something I haven't told you. About Tyler and Emma. About Grandma." "What is it?" Maddie retrieved her phone and opened her messaging app. "It started months ago. Little comments at first. Then it got worse." She showed me a series of text exchanges with her cousins that made my blood boil. Tyler had sent messages like, "Grandma says your black clothes make you look like you worship the devil, and Mom thinks you're a bad influence because you don't go to church every Sunday anymore." Emma's messages were equally cruel. "No one wants to hear about your depression. Just be normal." "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked, horrified that this had been happening right under my nose. "I thought I could handle it," Maddie whispered. "I thought maybe if I just tried harder to fit in with them." She scrolled to another conversation, this time with my mother. The messages confirmed everything. Nancy encouraging Maddie to keep certain thoughts to yourself around the younger ones, and suggesting she dress more appropriately for family gatherings. Most damning was a message from 3 weeks earlier. Jessica is concerned about your influence on Tyler and Emma. Perhaps you should reconsider your visit this Christmas. More screenshots revealed Jessica had been actively encouraging her children to exclude Maddie, praising them for reporting their cousin's concerning behavior and instructing them to avoid being alone with her. Guilt crashed over me like a wave. I had no idea this was happening. I should have protected you better. You couldn't have known, Maddie said softly. I should have told you sooner. We sat together on her bed, piecing together the full picture of months of subtle bullying and manipulation, all because Maddie had dared to develop her own identity, to question received wisdom, to express normal teenage emotions in what she thought was a safe space with family. I'm not going back there, Maddie said firmly. Not ever. Neither am. I agreed, not to people who could treat you this way. The reality of our situation suddenly hit me. It was Christmas Day, and we had no plans, no dinner preparations, nothing to mark the holiday. My phone buzzed with a text from Jessica. You're overreacting as usual. Come back and we can discuss this rationally. I silenced the device without responding. I don't suppose you're hungry? I asked Maddie, trying to salvage something of the day. A small smile flickered across her face. Actually, I am. We scoured the nearly empty refrigerator and found nothing suitable for Christmas dinner. Pizza delivery? I suggested, and Maddie nodded, the normalcy of our fallback meal providing small comfort. While waiting for the pizza, I made a crucial decision. I called my best friend Rachel, briefly explaining our situation without going into painful details. Rachel's response was immediate. You're coming over, both of you, right now. We have more than enough food, and Michael already opened too much wine. It's Christmas Day, Rachel. We can't impose. Sarah Adams, listen to me. You and Maddie are family to us. Get in your car and come over. No arguments. 30 minutes later, we stood on Rachel's doorstep with our hastily wrapped backup presents and the camera lens I'd given Maddie. The door flung open to warmth, light, and the delicious smell of Christmas dinner. Rachel hugged me fiercely, then turned to Maddie with equal warmth. Merry Christmas, you two. Come in before you freeze. The contrast between this welcome and our reception at my parents' house couldn't have been more stark. Rachel's husband, Michael, immediately handed me a glass of wine and offered Maddie her choice of hot chocolate or sparkling cider. Their teenagers, Jack and Lily, swept Maddie into the living room, showing her the new video game they'd received and instantly incorporating her into their play. You look shell-shocked, Rachel observed quietly as we stood in her kitchen. What really happened? I gave her the condensed version, my voice breaking several times. Rachel listened without interruption, her expression shifting from shock to anger. That's beyond cruel, she said finally. Who rejects a child at Christmas? Over normal teenage stuff? Apparently my family does, I replied bitterly. Rachel squeezed my shoulder. Well, you have family right here. Different kind, but just as real. Dinner at Rachel's was everything Christmas should be. Warm, inclusive, filled with laughter and genuine affection. I watched in amazement as Maddie gradually relaxed, even smiling as Jack teased her good-naturedly about her photography. Obsession. When Lily asked to see some of Maddie's photos, the pride on my daughter's face was beautiful to behold. Rachel had quickly wrapped a few extra gifts for us. Nothing expensive, just thoughtful tokens to ensure we didn't feel left out during their family exchange. The simple kindness brought tears to my eyes. Later, as the teenagers played board games, Rachel sat beside me on the couch. You know you're welcome to stay the night. The guest room is ready. I shook my head. We need to go home, start figuring out what happens next. But thank you for everything. That's what family does, she said simply. On the drive home, Maddie seemed lighter, as though the day's unexpected turn had shown her something important. Rachel's family is really nice, she observed. They are, I agreed. They've always been there for us. Is it weird that I felt more comfortable there than I have at Grandma's house for a long time? I considered this. Not weird at all. Sometimes the family we choose treats us better than the family we're born into. We arrived home late, emotionally exhausted but somehow more at peace. As I plugged in my phone to charge, dozens of notifications appeared, missed calls and texts from my parents and Jessica, their messages growing increasingly annoyed at my overreaction and dramatic exit. Not one message contained an apology or acknowledgement of the hurt they'd caused. Not one expressed concern for Maddie's feelings. In that moment, I made a decision that would shape our future. This toxic dynamic could not continue. Maddie appeared in my doorway in her pajamas. "Can I sleep in here tonight?" I patted the bed beside me, and she climbed in like she used to as a little girl. As she drifted off to sleep, I watched her face. So young still, yet carrying burdens no teenager should have to bear. I silently promised her that from this point forward, she would be surrounded only by people who truly loved and accepted her. That night, in the quiet darkness of Christmas night, I realized that family isn't defined by blood or tradition or shared history. It's defined by love, acceptance, and the willingness to make room for each person's authentic self. My parents and sister had failed that test spectacularly, but in doing so, they had inadvertently opened the door to a more genuine understanding of what family really means. The days after Christmas unfolded in a fog of emotional processing. My phone continued to buzz with messages I wasn't ready to read. Jessica sent a particularly lengthy text justifying their behavior. We were only trying to protect our family, values. Madison needs guidance, not encouragement of concerning behavior. My mother left voicemails claiming I had dramatically overreacted to a simple suggestion and ruined everyone's Christmas with my stubbornness. Not once did anyone ask how Maddie was feeling or acknowledge the cruelty of their rejection. On December 27th, I finally gathered the strength to research family estrangement and its psychological effects. The information was both validating and heartbreaking. Stories similar to ours appeared in article after article. Family members rejected for not conforming to rigid expectations, for developing independent identities, for questioning family dogma. The long-term damage such rejection could cause, particularly to young people, was well documented. I called Maddie's school counselor, Ms. Rivera, explaining the situation and asking for guidance. She agreed to see us during the holiday break, understanding the urgency of the situation. Family rejection is particularly devastating during significant holidays, Ms. Rivera explained during our session. The symbolic weight of being excluded from Christmas carries additional trauma. Maddie sat quietly as we discussed strategies for processing her feelings. When Ms. Rivera asked how she was coping, Maddie's response revealed her remarkable insight. "I'm sad, but also relieved," she admitted. "It's been exhausting trying to be someone I'm not around them. Always watching my words, hiding my thoughts, changing my clothes before visits." Ms. Rivera nodded. That kind of constant self-editing is emotionally draining. It's not a healthy dynamic for anyone, especially a teenager developing their identity. "What should we do about future family interactions?" I asked. "That depends on several factors," Ms. Rivera replied. "Is there acknowledgement of the harm caused? Willingness to change? Respect for boundaries?" Based on the messages I'd received, the answer to all three questions was a resounding no. With Ms. Rivera's guidance, I drafted a clear, firm email to my parents and Jessica. I explained that their treatment of Maddie was unacceptable, detailed the harm their actions had caused, and established that any future relationship would require genuine apology, acknowledgement of wrongdoing, and commitment to treating Maddie with respect and acceptance. "This isn't about punishment," I wrote. "It's about protection. I will not allow my daughter to be treated as less than or made to feel unwelcome in what should be her safe haven." The responses were predictably defensive. Dad claimed they were being misrepresented. Jessica accused me of always being hypersensitive. Mom suggested I was damaging family bonds over a misunderstanding. None addressed the core issue, their deliberate exclusion of Maddie and the hurtful messages she'd received for months. Meanwhile, Maddie and I began attending family therapy sessions together. The therapist helped us establish healthy boundaries and process our complicated feelings about the situation. Maddie initially struggled with self-blame, wondering if she could have somehow prevented the rejection by being less herself. "You don't need to make yourself smaller to deserve love," the therapist told her. "Real love makes room for growth and change and questions." January brought unexpected professional news. The promotion I'd been working toward for 2 years was suddenly mine. The hospital administration had recognized my dedication during the holiday season, particularly my willingness to cover emergency shifts. The new position came with more responsibility but also greater flexibility and a significant salary increase. "We won't need to rely on my parents for anything anymore," I told Maddie over celebration ice cream. "We can create our own traditions, our own support system." Maddie smiled, a genuine smile that had been rare since Christmas. "Can we start with a late Christmas? Just us?" We spent a weekend creating our belated holiday celebration. We bought a discounted artificial tree, hung lights around our apartment windows, and prepared a feast of all our favorite foods, none of which had ever appeared on my mother's traditional Christmas menu. We watched movies of our choosing, played board games that made us laugh until our sides hurt, and exchanged additional small gifts just for the joy of giving. It wasn't traditional, it wasn't perfect, but it was authentic and filled with genuine love, everything Christmas should be. As January turned to February, Jessica made another attempt at contact, this time with a carefully worded non-apology. "We're sorry you felt hurt by our concerns about Madison's influence." The message placed all responsibility on our feelings rather than their actions. I showed the message to our therapist, who helped me craft a response maintaining our boundaries. When you're ready to acknowledge that rejecting a child at Christmas was wrong, regardless of your concerns, we can begin rebuilding trust. Until then, we need space to heal. Maddie gradually rebuilt her confidence. She threw herself into photography with renewed passion, entering a citywide competition with a haunting black and white series titled Absence that captured empty chairs. At family gatherings, when she won first place in her age category, Rachel and her family attended the exhibition opening, cheering loudly as Maddie received her award. My parents sent a card when they heard about Maddie's photography success. Inside was a gift card to an electronics store, an impersonal token that addressed none of the underlying issues. Maddie looked at it thoughtfully before placing it in her desk drawer. "I don't want their money," she said. "I want them to see me for who I am." As winter thawed into spring, our support network expanded. Rachel's family remained constant fixtures in our lives. My coworkers, many of whom had complicated family situations themselves, provided understanding and occasional emergency babysitting when my new position required evening meetings. Maddie's photography teacher became a mentor, introducing her to local artists who welcomed her into their community. What surprised me most was how Maddie flourished once freed from the weight of family judgment. Her grades improved from already excellent to exceptional. She developed new friendships with peers who shared her interests. She started volunteering at a youth arts program, teaching photography to middle schoolers. One evening in March, as we prepared dinner together, Maddie asked a question that revealed her growing wisdom. "Do you think Grandma and Grandpa will ever really understand what they did wrong?" I considered this carefully. "I honestly don't know. Some people aren't capable of seeing beyond their own perspective. That's sad, Maddie replied. But it's not our responsibility to fix them, is it? No, I agreed, amazed at my daughter's insight. Our responsibility is to heal ourselves and create a life filled with people who genuinely love us. 2 weeks later, Maddie surprised me with an unexpected suggestion. What if we invite Rachel's family over for a special dinner? Sort of a thank you for Christmas, but also just because they're important to us. This simple proposal revealed how far we'd come, from excluded guests to confident hosts, from recipients of conditional love to creators of a chosen family based on mutual respect and genuine affection. The evening we hosted Rachel's family became a turning point in our journey. Watching Maddie laugh with Jack and Lily, seeing her proudly show Rachel's husband her latest photographs, I realized we weren't diminished by the absence of my biological family. We were expanded by the presence of people who truly saw and valued us. Late that night, after our guests had gone, Maddie hugged me unexpectedly. I think we're going to be okay, Mom. In that moment, I knew she was right. The painful Christmas rejection had torn away a false sense of family. But in its place, something stronger and more authentic was growing. We were not just surviving the rupture. We were thriving because of the freedom it ultimately provided. 1 year later, as December's familiar decorations appeared throughout the city, I marveled at how differently I felt approaching the holiday season. The previous Christmas had been devastating, but it had also been transformative. The rejection that once felt like an ending had become a beginning, the start of a more authentic life for both Maddie and me. We'd spent the year rebuilding our understanding of family and belonging. The apartment that had seemed so empty last Christmas Eve now felt like a sanctuary. We'd painted the walls colors my mother would have deemed too bold, hung Maddie's, photography in prominent places, and created a home that reflected who we truly were, not who others expected us to be. Our first decision about the approaching holiday was significant. We would host Christmas ourselves, not just for the two of us, but for the people who had become our chosen family. Rachel and Michael, their teenagers Jack and Lily, my colleague, Diane, who had no local relatives, Maddie's photography mentor Julian and his partner, and 2 of Maddie's closest friends whose parents were traveling. Is it weird that I'm actually excited about Christmas? Maddie asked as we hung lights around our living room windows. At 17, she'd blossomed into a confident young woman, her photography now displayed in 2 local galleries. The purple highlights had returned to her hair, joined by a streak of blue that suited her perfectly. Not weird at all, I replied. We're reclaiming it on our own terms. The month since last Christmas had brought expected and unexpected developments. My promotion had stabilized our finances, allowing us to move to a slightly larger apartment in the same building. Maddie had thrived in her junior year, her college applications now submitted to several arts programs with strong photography departments. Contact with my family had been minimal and carefully managed. In March, my father had called, his voice uncharacteristically subdued. Your mother misses you, he said. Not quite an apology, but the closest thing to acknowledgement we'd received. We miss aspects of our relationship too, I'd replied carefully. But things can't go back to how they were. After several similar conversations, we established highly limited contact, occasional phone calls with clear boundaries. I did not allow discussions of Maddie unless they were completely positive and supportive. My mother had difficulty maintaining these boundaries, often slipping into subtle criticism or concerns about Maddie's future. Each time, I ended the call immediately, a consequence that gradually trained her to respect our terms if she wanted any relationship at all. Jessica had made one half-hearted attempt at reconciliation in August, suggesting we put the past behind us without any actual apology or accountability. When I maintained our boundary, she accused me of holding grudges and dividing the family. I recognized these tactics for what they were, attempts to avoid responsibility by shifting blame. The most surprising development came from Tyler, now 14. He'd reached out to Maddie through social media with a message that showed a glimmer of independent thinking. "I miss talking to you. Mom doesn't know I'm messaging you." Though the contact was secretive and somewhat concerning in its need for hiding, it suggested Tyler was beginning to question the family narrative. Maddie had responded cautiously, maintaining appropriate boundaries while showing kindness to her younger cousin. "He's just a kid," she told me. "He's parroting what he hears at home." Her compassion, despite her own hurt, demonstrated a maturity beyond her years. As Christmas approached, we created entirely new traditions. Instead of my mother's formal dinner with precise timing and rigid expectations, we planned a relaxed potluck where everyone contributed their favorite dish. Rather than the uncomfortable gift exchange where value and sentiment were measured and judged, we organized a creative secret Santa with a $20 limit and emphasis on thoughtfulness over expense. Maddie designed beautiful invitations featuring her winter photography, each one personalized for the recipient. Her confidence in extending these invitations, in claiming the role of host rather than uncertain guest, showed how far she had come. The week before Christmas, an unexpected card arrived from my parents. Inside was a check for $500 and a note. "We hope you'll accept this gift in the spirit of the season. We think of you both often." Maddie and I discussed the check at length. "What do you think we should do with it?" I asked her, believing she deserved input on this decision. She considered thoughtfully. "Can we donate it? Maybe to that youth arts program I volunteer with? They're always needing supplies." Her choice to transform a complicated gift into something positive for others exemplified the person she was becoming. Someone who didn't perpetuate hurt, but channeled difficult emotions into constructive action. On Christmas Eve, our apartment filled with the chosen family we'd gathered. Rachel brought her famous lasagna. Michael mixed holiday cocktails for the adults and elaborate mocktails for the teenagers. Maddie's friends brought homemade cookies and boundless energy. Julian and his partner arrived with art books and enthusiastic hugs. Watching Maddie move confidently among our guests, explaining her latest photography project to Julian, laughing with her friends, helping Rachel's children with the holiday playlist, I felt overwhelming gratitude. This vibrant, authentic gathering would have been impossible in my parents' home with its rigid expectations and conditional acceptance. Late that evening, after most guests had departed and only Rachel's family remained for our planned Christmas morning breakfast, Rachel handed me an envelope. "Just a little something extra," she said with a smile. Inside was a card signed by everyone who had attended our gathering. It read simply, "To our chosen family. Love is always the right choice." The card now sits framed on our mantel, a reminder that family is not defined by blood but by belonging, not by obligation but by choice, not by history but by how people treat each other in the present. Last Christmas, my parents and sister told my 16-year-old daughter there was no room for her. They couldn't have known they were setting us free. Free to discover that love expands to fill any space. Free to build connections based on acceptance rather than conformity. Free to create a home where everyone has room to be exactly who they are. The painful rejection forced us to rebuild from scratch, but what we constructed is stronger, more authentic, and infinitely more nurturing than what we lost. Sometimes the greatest gift is discovering who truly deserves a place in your life, and having the courage to make room only for them. Have you ever had to redefine what family means to you? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments. If this resonated with you, please subscribe and share with someone who might need to hear that family isn't just about blood, it's about who makes room for you, exactly as you are. Thank you for being part of this journey with me, and may your holidays be filled with people who truly see and celebrate you.